Good morning. Thanks very much to everybody for joining us here on day 3 at the International Investors Lounge and part of the live program that we're running from Expo Real, looking at different opportunities. And this is going to be a fascinating one, looking particularly at innovation and science parks, which is, I guess, one of the growing ones that people are looking at in terms of sectors. Very lucky to have René Buck here, who is president and founder of BCI Global. And René is just going to, I guess, take us through some of the numbers, where there's the investment opportunity, and then I'll be picking up with questions. So, René, do join us.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. And as Richard already said, we're talking here about an asset class which is still emerging. And I compare it a little bit with logistics real estate, which was 10 years ago a kind of awkward kind of a real estate. And now we see that logistics real estate is an asset class in itself, with its own matrices, with its own conferences, magazines, etc. I want to talk about technology and science parks because the future for Europe, but also for example in the US, is pretty much for technology-driven companies. So here is the agenda. I'll give you a quick profile on BCI Global. Then talk about a little bit educational, ecosystem, clusters, areas of innovation. What are we really talking about? At the end of the day, the question is, okay, if you set up a science park or an innovation park, you need tenants, right? You need occupiers, you need companies who want to establish there. So I want to give you a glimpse of how these companies, these tech-driven companies, make their location decisions. Then the market potential, is this really something which will grow? Will we see in the future more science and innovation parks in Germany, in the UK, in the Nordics, in France? And then some advice on if you are working in or for a science park or area of innovation, how can you position it and market it, and then end up with some conclusions. Buck Consultants International was founded in 1985. A company which actually does a lot of work on location strategy and supply chain development for companies. So if a tech company wants to set up an R&D hub or an engineering center, we advise them what is the best location to do that. So it's beyond real estate. It's also including labor and ecosystems and visa and international connectivity. We are doing that now with 75 consultants working in offices around the world, not only in the Netherlands, where I was born and raised, and in Germany, but we have now 4 offices in the US, one in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, San Mateo, one in Southern California, in Irvine, which is in the LA area. We are in Dallas, Texas, and in Atlanta, in Georgia. But also in Asia, we are working for companies who are looking into Europe or looking into the US. So we have our teams in Shanghai, Singapore, and Taipei. And BCI is a global consulting boutique. So we are a boutique consulting firm, and we are proud to say that Forbes magazine, the well-known American business magazine, makes every year an overview of the best management consulting companies in the world, on the planet. And for 3 years now, BCI, Buck Consultants International, is on that list. Now, here you see a number of companies who are continuously optimizing their footprint, their R&D strategy. It's always a matter of what are the new products, what are the new processes, what are the new technologies, what kind of new platforms do we have. And you see here a large number of companies who are looking into that. And these are, by the way, also all our clients of ours, which we help with their R&D strategy, manufacturing strategy, but also supply chain strategy. Now, as we noticed that a number of our clients, I would say 15 years ago, started to look more into campuses, science parks, areas of innovation, because that was the right habitat, the right ecosystem for them to establish. And so we use our knowledge of how our tech-driven clients make location decisions also to support science parks and campuses all over the world. And we do that in advising them on the science park owners or the investors or the economic development agencies by looking on a strategic but also an operational level, how to get it going. How do you develop a science park? It's not only about real estate, right? It's also about the technology base? Can you work together with a university? Is there an environment for a startup? So all these kind of elements are taken into account if we talk about science park development. And in our view, that is then development of the concept. What is the value proposition really? Feasibility and market study. Every mayor in Europe wants to have a science park, but is it feasible? Are there shared innovation facilities? So are there clean rooms which you can share with other companies, so keeping your costs down? And marketing plans. So using our knowledge of working for companies, we transform that, we translate that into, for developers, investors, cities, regions who want to set up a science park or an innovation campus, to look into what is a good concept which will be successful in the future. Now, we are talking about a global world, right? Every company, even smaller companies, have clients all over the place. And still proximity matters. So you could say that for certain activities, you can be anywhere in the globe. If you talk about credit card processing, for example, it doesn't matter where you are, even sometimes for call centers. But if we are talking about knowledge-intensive activities, you want to be close to each other. Proximity really matters. You want to work with like-minded people. You want to talk with other companies in your same industry vertical to be sure that you are there. And that's what campuses and science park offer. These innovation parks, they offer the environment where companies which are tech-driven, are knowledge-intensive, group together, learn from each other, work together on new exciting products and processes. And that makes also that proximity is really important. It's in walking distance being from each other. Doesn't mean that they don't work with universities all over the world, but that proximity is an additional element to accelerate innovation. Now, if we talk about a science park or innovation campus, what are key characteristics? In many cases, certainly with science parks, you have a kind of knowledge center, a knowledge base, which is often a university or a university medical center or a large research institute, but can also be a large R&D center from an individual company, from a corporate who wants to broaden its base. It's also having the focus on those parks for R&D and innovation. You cannot set up logistics sheds there. The neighbors should be companies in the same type of activity, from research and development, engineering, etc. These science parks and innovation parks are also high quality in terms of environment, in terms of public space. But also important, you see that on the bottom right corner, is an innovation ecosystem. So you can be close to a university and say, well, that's great because they have fantastic researchers. But if that university is closed in terms of not being able and not willing to cooperate with other companies, then you are just neighbors and not interacting with each other. So those characteristics, that strong focus on R&D and innovation, presence of an anchor tenant, which could be that university medical center, large R&D center of a international company, high quality business park, and an active innovation systems, those are the ones which really make a science park a success. And more in detail, and I will not go into detail here, there are a number of buttons you have to push. And if you see these 11 elements, you all need them. The larger they are key. So know-how and technology. Can you really work together with the university? It's about talent, because talent is so key if we work for companies who want to innovate, who want to strengthen their R&D efforts. And it's that transfer of know-how. Is that open innovation really the attitude, the atmosphere of companies at such a science park? But you can see also that even smaller shackles in the chain can stop the whole network. So all 11 factors should be in place to really be a successful science park. So these science parks offer a great environment for companies to set up their R&D centers, to have the right environment to accelerate innovation. They attract also talent. And so it becomes a focal point for knowledge workers. And we could see that here even at the Expo Real, that a lot of cities and regions from all over the world try to position their region and saying, hey, we are great in this particular field of life sciences, or We are fantastic in chip manufacturing or chip design. So that is what the Science Park has to offer. Companies in the same sector of industry, focused on R&D, working together, and by working together and sharing facilities, have a faster and smarter success of their R&D efforts. Now, I talked about science parks, for example, in relation to universities. But starting in the US and also in the UK and now also more in the European continent, we see innovation districts. Innovation districts are more inner city neighborhoods where a mix of functions takes place, where a lot of large number of technology-driven companies are established. And the difference is that they are in a city, while science parks, certainly in the US, are really on the outskirts of a city. And they are multifunctional. So it's not only R&D, and if you are not doing R&D, you are not allowed to perform activities. But in these innovation districts, you have also educational facilities, you have housing, you have recreational activities. So it's multifunctional and more in a city. And if you would say it a little bit black and white, the science parks are more monofunctional, R&D and advanced manufacturing, and often not in the city itself. The reasons why these innovation districts are coming up is also because we have more crossover between technologies. So it's great to have only companies in a certain specific sector of industry on a science park. But innovation districts are also in crossovers. And an important element is also young, high-skilled talent wants to live in cities. That's what we see all over the world. So having a business environment focusing on innovation and R&D in the city where these people live, that can be advantages as well. So we see often also that the density in those innovation districts, you see more high-rise than on a typical science park, and you have more diverse community of companies setting up there. So there are good reasons why these innovation districts have come up, not as a substitute, in our opinion, from a science park or an innovation park, but as an additional business environment where innovation and R&D plays a key role. And here are some examples of companies who recently established in a science park or an innovation park. So you see that in the US, in Taiwan, in Europe, that a lot of companies find out that their right business environment for their research and development activities is actually at such a science park or innovation park. Now, there are advantages for companies, obviously, because you have like-minded people, you can share facilities, you can co-develop. There is often a focus on specialized personnel. There are advantages for if there is a university, because they can transfer know-how or sell land. The cities and regions where these science and innovation parks are established are also happy because you get new high-paid jobs, you have an acceleration of new startups. But there are also advantages for real estate investors. And that's growing. I mentioned already, we see that as a growing asset class. Because as innovation will be the demanding driving force for the next 15 years. Look what's happening in the automotive industry as an example. Look what's happening with the design of chips which can facilitate and enable artificial intelligence. Then they will concentrate on these kind of business environments. So for investors, it becomes also interesting with the growth potential and the profitability, low risk, because even if some of these startups go bankrupt, then there will be other, if the innovation system and the university is spinning off new companies, then if company A goes bankrupt or doesn't make it in the market, then company B will take that place. So in the long term, we think that the interest of investors, on developers and investors, will be more and more on these type of environments. And my expectation is that in 5 or 10 years' time, this will be considered as a real new asset class, with its own metrics, with its own conferences, with its own magazines, perhaps. So these science parks and innovation campuses become more and more interesting from a real estate perspective as well. Now, if you set up a science and an innovation park, you need tenants, right? At the end of the day, whether they lease a building or a building constructing their own facility. And in our work as location consultants, we always consider the location decisions 3 types of factors. Cost factors, everything you can express in dollars or in euros or in yen. You have quality of the business environment factors. How great is that university? Can I find the right talent? And you have risk factors. And risk factors are obviously more the external factors, which you cannot influence as an individual company. So here on the slide you can see, let's take a software engineering center which wants to set up. On the cost side, it looks like pretty simple. You have labor costs for the various types of software engineers. You have real estate costs, leases of buildings or labs. You have sometimes incentives which you can deduct from that. And so if a company considers 10 science parks or 10 interesting locations, then you can make a comparison on the cost side by calculating what is the total bill we're going to pay at each of these 10 locations for the next 5 to 10 years. It's just a calculation. And we try to take into account inflation and labor cost increases as well. If you talk about the quality of the business environment, then you can see here that's not something you can immediately express in currencies. So what we do in interaction with our clients, we look into which factors are more important than other factors. That's the reason why you see here a number of factors with weightings. And in the discussion with the clients, we try to determine what is the weighting of those factors, which can be different for various types of operations. So this is about talent availability and quality is obviously important. Is there for this software engineering center, is there a lot of competition on the market? What about labor regulations and reliability, hiring and firing regulations, works council, regulatory affairs, and also language skills and cultural compatibility can play a role. And this is actually from a case we worked on the last 12 months of a company who makes a decision for setting up a software engineering hub. So you see weightings, which according to the client, which factors are important more or less. And then what we do is we look into what have these 10 locations, as an example, really have to offer. What are these 10 locations? What are the scores on all these factors? And we give our client not only the raw data, but we give them also a kind of classification in 5 categories, 1 to 5. 1 is poor, 5 is excellent. So you can imagine that if you have all these weightings and all these scores between 1 and 5, you get for this specific project the kind of weighted quality factor. Between 1 and 5. It's the weightings according to the client. You can sometimes even do a great sensitivity analyses if a certain factor, if I increase that and I still keep it the total amount to 100%, is there a change in the scores of the 10 locations? And here you see some other locations on a quality assessment, also on accessibility, IT reliability, quality of life, if the company wants to have expats, real estate. The weightings are determined by the client. There is only one rule: you may not allow, it has to add up to 100%. Let's put it that way. And then you have risk assessments. You see that here on the bottom. Often these external factors, whether it's exchange rate risks, political, economic, for example, now you notice the discussions in high-tech industries between the sensitivity of Chinese equipment, etc. So these kind of factors can also play a role in a company's location decisions. And here we do the same. We look into the weightings together with the client, and we rate them the scores of these risk factors. So this is the way how it adds up. Now on the vertical axis, you see the cost for this engineering center for the next 5 years. On the top of the vertical axis, you see a low number, 8. On the bottom, you see a high number, 16. So a CFO would say, I want to have a location which is on the upper side of the vertical axis because that's more cost effective. On the horizontal axis, you see that score, that weighted quality score, so weighted according to what the clients was looking for with our assessments of what the 10 locations have to offer. So you get a weighted quality score between 1 and 5, or in this case between 2.5 and 4.5. So if you want to set up a new R&D center, you would love to have a location which is in the upper right-hand cell, right, where you see that green smiley, because that's a location where you have low cost and high quality of the business environment. And nobody wants to locate on the bottom left-hand cell because that's and expensive and a low quality of the business environment. And you can even also bring risk into the equation. So a company has to decide, am I going to the location E from Edward, which is the cost leader, or I go to location A from Anthony because that's the quality of the business environment. And the company has to make a trade-off. And that's in all the location decisions we do, support companies in the nearly 40 years of our existence. A location in the center of the market where there are abundant high-skilled labor and a lot of PhDs and an open university and low cost and fantastic taxes and high incentives, that location doesn't exist. So you have to make the trade-off between what on the cost side, what on the quality side, what is the risk side. And this is a way how we show to our clients that they have actually to see what the trade-off should be. Now, talking about market potential, there's a lot of discussion on decentralization of production. And in Europe and in the US, we often call it reshoring, right? Bringing production capacity from China/Asia back to Europe. Will that happen also in R&D? Will we see more regionalization of research and development? And our answer is yes, and we base that just on our own portfolio of clients. Because clients will try to tap from the technology bases around the world and not having only one large R&D center in the world. They will look for proximity of markets because in the D from development, you also want to, that's closer to the market, and then you want to be close to that market to understand what are the specifics. Sometimes it also is that the size of an R&D center should not become too large, but you also want to understand the talent coming from different countries. I recall a project we did for an R&D center where we in detail analyzed what kind of graduates were coming from universities in the locations under study. And our client said, yeah, but we expect 75% of the people not coming from the location themselves, so coming from abroad. So then the question is, are you really attractive for that? And so taking advantage of the background and the talent bases all over the world, that's the reason why we expect that companies set up regional R&D centers. Last point of view, incentives. If you take, for example, now on the chips, the semiconductor industry, in the US, in Europe, in Japan, there are huge R&D stimulating programs where companies who want to set up R&D centers really can play a role. So that market potential is there. And if you look to the major location requirements, high level, you can see that these technology parks, these innovation parks, tick the boxes. They have the talent, they have the technology base. You can participate with universities. So there is a good reason why the number of companies, tech-driven companies, who set up in science and innovation parks is increasing. There is good reasons for that, and here you see where the boxes are ticking. Okay, last point in the agenda. If you want to set up a successful science and technology park, how do you do that? And we look into 4 steps. First, you have to understand what your technology niche is. Where are you really great in? Wherever you are in Europe, what is really at your university or in your region a outstanding technology niche where you can convince everybody that that is really, according to international standards, outstanding. Then you have to develop what we call a technology value proposition, a document to make a potential tenant aware what are the specific capabilities you can offer from this particular innovation and science park to them. Identify target companies, because you also have to make a list of companies which might have an interest, and reach out to those companies. So let me walk you quickly through those 4 steps. There are a lot of companies and also a lot of cities here at the Expo Real who say, yeah, we are great in life sciences. That's nonsense. You cannot be great in life sciences. You can only be great in certain niches. There are only a couple of cities or regions in the world who can be great in life sciences in the whole scale of activities you are. So you have to identify in what particular niche are we good. So look at the left-hand side. If companies say, yeah, we are great in life sciences, does that mean advanced biomedical materials? Does that mean lab on a chip? Does that mean diagnostic analytics? Does that mean precision medicine? So if you say we are great in life sciences, what do you really mean? And all these different subsectors have their own industries, their own specialized companies. So it sounds a little bit weird, but from a marketing perspective, if you want to market a science and innovation park, you have to make yourself small. You have to make yourself small and focused, because that's the only way how you can find out that you are great in a certain element. So if you are good in early drug discovery, so in the very first phase of inventing new medicine, then you have to market that specific capability. And here on the right-hand side, you see that the same for cybersecurity. So make a focused approach and prove that you are really great on that. That's step one. The second step is, how can we then go to potential companies by making clear that we are in this early drug discovery, I take that as an example, that this particular city anywhere in Europe and this particular university really has something to offer. So make a presentation of 25 slides, not too fancy, but look into what the companies are looking for. They are not looking for your fantastic real estate in the beginning. They're first looking to technology base, to cooperation possibilities, to what kind of great research programs or PhDs are in that early drug discovery phase working at that particular location. So that value proposition should really be interesting for potential companies, because they receive from all over the world dozens per day. So if it's not focused, if it's not to their particular interest, they will just skip it. And we support companies with our background of working for a lot of companies, and in this case life sciences companies, how to develop such a value proposition. Then you have to reach out to companies. Now, there are in Boston 4,000 life sciences companies. If I give you a database of 4,000 companies, what are you going to do with that? Send them an email, which you know that everybody will delete. You cannot have somebody calling 4,000 companies. So this is also why making yourself small helps you. I recall that we did for a client a study in the Boston area. And if you talk on companies specializing in molecular imaging, so making images of molecules, there were only 34. 34 is a sizable group. You can call them, you can email them, you can send them your specific presentation. So that's the way to do it. So identifying those companies, small, big, blue chip startups, companies which are growing, which have a lot of patents, that's the way to build up, bottom up, a database for your specific technology niche. And then you have to reach out to those companies to make it really a success. Now, here are my conclusions. R&D and innovation are key to the growth of companies, and we will see that more and more in Europe, and certainly in a couple of years' time with the aging population. We know that you cannot say that the size of the market is only good enough. If we have to survive, if the European economies have to survive, innovation has to be key. We see that companies really want to cooperate with other companies. So 20 years ago, companies said, okay, all the bright people in the world in my industry are on my payroll. We have closed doors. We have high fences around our labs. Now you see that companies are willing to cooperate with others, so more open, more shared. But that means also more close to each other, and that makes that element of proximity so interesting. These science park innovation campuses, areas of innovation, how you exactly define them, offer the right technology ecosystem and innovation environments for technology-driven companies. So in all the researches we do all over Europe, we see the number of companies and the number of tenants setting up at a science park or an innovation park is actually really increasing. So it will be an interesting asset class. If I go back to the real estate perspective, the growth in demand of tenants will be there, and there's a good profitability and risk ratio. I think it's important to understand that if you set up a science park, and if you are involved in there as a developer or investor, it's different from offices. It's different from logistics, real estate, or student housing. It's a different world. You have to deal with weird professors who have no clue about real estate, but which are brilliant in their profession. You have also to look into what is the local situation you really can take benefit of. So, in conclusion, I think that these science and innovation parks are really interesting from various perspectives for tenants who want to be to like-minded people, for the cities and regions because they see an interesting opportunity to stimulate the economy. It's for the universities or the university medical centers because they have the opportunity to transfer their know-how. And last but not least, it will also be interesting for developers and investors because it has an interesting perspective in the future where you can really earn money as well. So with that, Richard, I give the floor back to you.
Really interesting to get the insights in terms of why you're seeing the growth of that, and also the kind of detail that people are looking at in terms of selecting those locations. And I guess from a real estate perspective and an opportunity perspective, how do you see that, for example, if we compare it to early stage logistics, in terms of some of the trends? Do you see that as something that is maybe already more of an asset class in the US, for example, and growing more in Europe? What's your sense of that?
Oh, I think in the US it's already more an asset class. You have, for example, in the US also large hundreds of $1 million investors only focusing on life sciences incubators, building for startups with clean rooms, etc. It's growing in Europe. Sometimes you have also what I call local heroes, so that in a certain city there is for decades already a company active in that field. So it is a developing asset class. But for example, there's a Dutch company, Cadans, who set up an incubator. They started 20 years ago as a niche type of company in the Netherlands, and now they are in 11 European countries, with particularly setting up buildings, incubators at these kind of innovation environments to be successful.
And it would be interesting, I mean, for example, you mentioned life sciences, and of course there are elements there where, particularly in terms of the spaces, people are looking to be close to a large population, looking to be near a hospital, for example. So those kinds of things that are also driving that. If we look at innovation centres, does that mean that automatically people will want to be near universities, nearer that kind of research facilities? I suppose what's additionally driving, I guess, the locations there?
I think if you are a company and you have an own R&D center or a group of people who are working on a new medicine, on a new drug, and if you know then that there is a certain university which in your particular field on breast cancer or something is really good, is outstanding, is recognized by everybody in the scientific community as, hey, you have to be at that university, that is advantageous to be across the road of that university. But what happens is that, so the location is there, but the reach, the geographical reach of those companies is nearly always global, because you cannot imagine that you make a successful drug against breast cancer and that you only want to sell it in Germany. You cannot imagine that, right? So what you see in technology, if you have something great, it has to be global. So a lot of these companies start wherever in the world and have then, once they are successful and their medicines are approved, they have quickly to conquer the rest of the world, because breast cancer in itself is in Europe the same as in the US.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to get a sense of, I suppose, when you're looking at one of these from a real estate perspective, how much do you have to curate in order to make a successful innovation park? Because presumably that's also that people want to be next to other people that they can work with in the chain, or that they can, learn from one another, that there's an advantage there in collaborating, for example.
It's clear that if you are in an early stage of a science park, you have a piece of land and nothing in there. So the first years are always difficult to get the first tenants to get, and then that's also why the cooperation with a university or university medical center is so important to get the first tenant. Then you get a phase where you have a growth phase where companies start to recognize, hey, that's the location where you have to be for this particular industry. And I think that's also, so you need, if you are working on the real estate and innovation and science park, it's not a success you can reach in a couple of months' time. So you really have to invest in that. So that ecosystem is important to nurture, to do that, because you want to avoid that you get a kind of cathedral in desert, right? That you have one building with an interesting group of clients and then the total area is desert. That's not what you want. So it is for investors with a longer term perspective, then it's really an interesting opportunity.
And the other thing that I wanted to pick up with you, final one from me, if anybody has any questions, let me know. But for example, when you're talking about, everybody knows that Seattle, for example, big in life sciences. Yeah. You've got Eindhoven, you've got Cambridge, you've got different areas. but I'm wondering whether or not actually there's an advantage in, let's say in the UK, you have centres of excellence in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in Bristol, that actually you begin to talk about what the UK has to offer. It has, rather than them being competing, that actually there are all of these, there's this expertise across the country, and this, similarly for the Netherlands, for example.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of locations in the world, if you talk about California or perhaps New York, New Jersey or Tokyo, who really can say, we have it all, right? For the other locations in the world, you have to specialize. You have to look into, like I showed in my presentation, hey, if we are great in life sciences or in the semiconductor industry, in what part of the semiconductor industry are you great? In what part of innovation in batteries, we use in electric vehicles, can you really prove that this university, this city, this ecosystem has something to offer? So I think that's, so there is not, if for individual companies, it's not, if you really want to work together with the best of the best at universities, it's not like that in the UK or in the Netherlands or in Germany, you have to figure out 20 different science parks. It becomes from your specialization and from the need to work with excellent researchers, pretty clear what are the top 3, 4 for your specific project are interested. And if you don't know that, you can always go to location consultants as BCI.
And I notice we have Courtney Finger here who looks at the FDI world. Courtney, I don't know if you've got a view on that, in terms of some of the countries, how they can maybe grow that element.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, that'll be easier.
Sure. Well, first of all, I also have a question for you, but I'll circle back. I mean, I was interested in what you pointed out, the difference of the sort of science parks that are out in the suburbs somewhere, and the more, I guess, European style that is in closer to the city center. And it feels to me like that city center approach is probably more effective. So I'm curious whether that should be the recommended model worldwide. U.S. is a little bit of an exception, and does that kind of assist what you were just talking about? I mean, is that like a model that could be replicated and that also would help join the innovation that's happening in universities and medical facilities, research institutes with the companies, and be more effective as a driver of FDI?
Yeah, I think some of the locations where science park and innovation parks are located is just a legacy of the location. Universities which are on the outskirts of the city just built there for decades ago. I think that the innovation districts will be more something for Europe because, for example, we have if you go to the Research Triangle Park in the Carolinas, you need your car to go to the neighbor. The neighbors are 2 miles down the road. So while innovation districts and science parks should be on that walking distance, there is actually a story somebody told that you need to be at Starbucks distance. And what does that mean? Now, first of all, it's important because Buck is in Starbucks. But the second element is that Starbucks distance means that one researcher calls the other researcher on the park and says, hey, let's go sit together later this afternoon. Shall I bring you a cup of coffee? And then once the two meet, the coffee is still hot. So that's a operational definition of what does proximity means. So I think, Courtney, what you're saying that innovation districts will probably more fit in the urban development system, the urban network, the network of city centers and cities we have in Europe. But in some locations, you just have also that the universities at a location where it was developed over time. And I see it also as not competing innovation environments, but complementary innovation environments. Some companies will feel more comfortable at that academic type of business environment. Some will more, let's say, in a science park, you smell the research of the professors and the researchers. In an innovation district, you smell more also business. How to make from this great product a business, a company is successful and become a millionaire.
Well, I haven't heard the term Starbucks in terms of the
Yeah, here you go.
So that is good. And therefore, I will always now remember that Buck isn't Starbucks. Yes.
I have two questions for you. One is, you mentioned Europe, you mentioned the Netherlands. Are there some countries in your experience that are particularly ahead, apart from the Netherlands, in Europe, or that are promising? And the second question is, you were talking about the choices that companies make, whether it's in the perfect location that ticks all the boxes. Again, in your experience, the companies you have advised, what do they tend to go for? Is it the cost savings? Is it the talent? Is it labor flexibility and so on? What are the boxes that they most like to see?
I think to start with the first one, with your second question, for a lot of companies who set up an R&D center, it's not about cost. It's mainly about, can I find technology bases? Can I find cooperation possibilities with a university or a research institute? Because it's all about acceleration of innovation, and they are looking for talent. So will, at the end of the day, a real estate manager try to get the best deal? Answer is yes. Is that a prime decision? There's nobody which I have seen in this particular area who says, yeah, I saw a nice picture of that new science park in Leipzig, let's go there. That's not, they start from a different perspective. They start, how can I make my R&D efforts more successful by establishing close to a location where the technology and the talent base is available? Your first question is, we see a lot of these successful science parks in Germany, in the UK, less in France. I see also that in Central and Eastern Europe, which are going through a phase, 50 years ago, companies went to Central and Eastern Europe, primarily for the low cost and the availability of talent. But they are going into a technology phase as well. So for example, in Brno, in the Czech Republic, you see that the logistics parks there are becoming more or less innovation and science parks, quite interesting. So there is a variety of these initiatives all over the world. If you go to the website of the International Association of Science Parks, they have a list of members, so that you get also a better feeling of who they're. But it's certainly not only for Western Europe. I was in June talking at the BIO, which is the largest biotech conference in the world, in San Diego in California. And I was a speaker at a conference of life sciences science parks. And they came literally from all over the States and from all over the world, because they had to make the trip to California anyway, so that was the purpose of that conference. So, but it's also a good test, and a final remark, whether a university, if you talk with a university and with the dean or the whatever, they will always say, we have great researchers. Because they have to, right? They are paid to say that their professors and their researchers are fantastic. But at the end of the day, it's not true. Yesterday, there is a ranking of universities in the world, and it was published yesterday again. And you see universities stepping up the ranking. You see some are going down there. So you cannot say, well, all our researchers in our fields are all fantastic. And identifying, and so that those technology niches, which I mentioned as a first step in developing yourself, where are you really great in? Don't listen to the marketeers. Don't listen to the deans of universities. Go to the researchers to really find out who is really actually great, in my example of breast cancer as an example.
Great, really interesting. If anybody else has a question, now is the time to do it, because we are at the end of our time. Really fascinating, I think, to be able to get that deep dive into this growing sector, and for sure it looks as though there's opportunities to come in that.
Sure.
And obviously your hint that there should be new magazines and journals and events. And,
yeah, that's your area of expertise, Richard.
Us, so
yeah,
we'll see what we can do, René.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks to everybody joining us here, and thanks to everybody for joining us online. And if you're watching this on demand, thanks very much for watching.